"Please, sir, you have to take my baby." The words, a ghost of a sound against the biting November wind, sliced through Alastair Finch. He, a CEO whose world revolved around calculated risks and decisive actions, froze mid-stride on the icy pavement. Before him, a young woman, her face a canvas of raw desperation and chilblains, extended a small, bundled infant. Her eyes, hollow and pleading, locked onto his, offering up the most precious thing she had. In that terrible, suspended moment, as snow swirled around like a cruel confetti, Alastair felt the carefully constructed fortress of his life begin to tremble. He didn't know it then, but his response wouldn't just alter her fate. It would irrevocably reshape his own soul. Alastair Finch commanded an empire of glass and steel from his penthouse office, a space that mirrored his life, impeccably organized, breathtakingly successful, and profoundly empty. His days were a symphony of ringing phones, urgent emails, and boardrooms where fortunes were made or lost on his word. He ate alone, his meals often a utilitarian affair at his vast mahogany desk, the cityscape his silent companion. Evenings in his minimalist apartment were quiet, the silence broken only by the hum of the climate control. He had wealth beyond measure, respect, even fear, but warmth was a luxury he'd long since traded for ambition. He'd once known it, in fleeting memories of his mother's gentle hand, her weary smiles in their cramped two-room flat. But that was a lifetime ago, before the drive to escape that poverty had consumed him, leaving little room for softer emotions. He contributed generously to charities, his donations managed by a committee, efficient and impersonal. He believed in systemic solutions, not messy, individual entanglements. Unseen, in the bottom drawer of his nightstand, lay an old, tarnished silver locket, a gift from his mother. He never wore it, rarely looked at it. Yet he could never bring himself to discard it, a silent testament to a connection he thought was severed. Sarah, on the other hand, knew only a world of dwindling options. Her small life had unraveled thread by painful thread. A lost job when the diner she worked at unexpectedly shuttered, then the father of her unborn child vanishing like mist. Friends offered couches, then apologetic excuses. Shelters were overcrowded, sometimes frightening. Each closed door pushed her further towards the abyss. Lily, her tiny, innocent daughter, her only reason to keep fighting. She walked for miles that day, Lily clutched tight against the creeping cold. Her own hunger a dull ache compared to the fierce, primal fear for her child. Every dismissive glance, every hurried passerby, chipped away at her remaining hope until only a raw, desperate resolve remained. Lily had to survive, even if Sarah herself did not. That particular Tuesday, an early, brutal winter had seized the city. Alastair had just concluded a grueling week of negotiations, the weight of a multi-billion-dollar merger pressing down on him. Exhausted but with a familiar hum of triumph thrumming beneath his bespoke suit, he'd exited his office building, his driver, Michael, already opening the door to the waiting Bentley. His mind was on tomorrow's press conference, on shareholder reactions. He barely registered the shadows in the service alley, a common, if unwelcome, feature of the urban landscape. He believed in contributing to shelters, of course. That was the proper, organized way to deal with such societal issues. Then, a figure detached itself from the deeper gloom. It was Sarah, stumbling forward, her clothes offering paper-thin protection against the gnawing wind. When she lifted her face, gaunt and streaked with frozen tears, Alastair stopped. It wasn't just poverty he saw, but despair so profound it was a physical blow. And in her arms, the small, still bundle. "Please, sir." Her voice was a ragged whisper, each syllable in agony. Snowflakes melted on her chapped lips. She took another faltering step. "You have to take her." She thrust the baby towards him. She won't make it out here with me. I have nothing left to give her. Please, I'm begging you." The city's cacophony, the distant sirens, the rumble of traffic, the howling wind, all receded to a dull roar. There was only this woman, this impossible, heartbreaking request. Alistair, a man who could command boardrooms and sway markets, felt a wave of utter helplessness. The sheer audacity, the sheer desperation of her plea, short-circuited his analytical mind. Take her baby? The legalities, the practicalities, the sheer human weight of it, crashed down upon him. His ingrained instinct was to deflect, to call social services, to delegate. That was a sensible, detached response. But then his gaze fell upon the baby, Lily. Her tiny face, pale and still, was nestled in the worn blanket. A fragile, whimpering sound escaped her lips, a sound that seemed to bypass Alistair's intellect and strike directly at some long-dormant core within him. He saw the raw, bleeding cracks on Sarah's trembling hands as she held out her child, an offering of ultimate sacrifice. He saw not an abstract problem, but a mother pushed beyond the limits of human endurance, her love for her child a beacon in the terrifying darkness of her circumstances. For a fleeting second, he saw his own mother's face years ago, her eyes filled with that same fierce, protective love as she fought to keep them afloat. I can't just take your baby, he finally managed, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate in his own mouth. It was a statement of bewildered fact, not a rejection. But Sarah's shoulders sagged as if he'd struck her. A dry, hacking sob escaped her. Then who will? She cried, her voice cracking. She's just a baby. She deserves the chance. A warm bed, food, something I can't give her. Her agony was a tangible thing, pressing it on him. He could feel Michael's worried gaze from the car. What if he walked away? What if he made the calls and help arrive too late? The image of this tiny, innocent life extinguished by the cold, by indifference, seared itself into his mind. It was a risk he suddenly found unbearable, a decision formed not from logic or business acumen, but from a place of raw, unexpected empathy. Come with me, he heard himself say, his voice surprisingly firm, yet gentler than he intended. Both of you. Let's get you out of this cold. We can talk then. Somewhere warm. Sarah stared, a flicker of wild hope warring with deep-seated fear in her exhausted eyes. Where? Who are you? My name is Alistair. And that's my car, he gestured. It's warm. We'll figure things out. I promise. He didn't wait for her consent. Didn't want to give her a chance to refuse, or for his own rational mind to intervene. He gently took her elbow, guiding her trembling form towards a Bentley. She was terrifyingly light, almost ethereal. Michael, ever professional, opened the rear passenger door without a word, his expression carefully neutral, though Alistair caught a flicker of deep surprise in his eyes. The contrast was surreal. Sarah, shivering in her rags, clutching Lily, sinking into the plush, heated leather of the luxury sedan. Alistair slid in beside Michael. The Willow Creek townhouse, Michael, he instructed, his voice low, and call Dr. Evans. Tell her it's a personal emergency for me. Then contact Mrs. Davies. Tell her I need her at the townhouse immediately, with supplies for an infant and a young woman. Yes, Mr. Finch. The Bentley pulled away smoothly, a silent, warm sanctuary gliding through the storm-lashed streets. Sarah huddled in the back. Lily held tight, her gaze fixed on Alistair with a mixture of terror, disbelief, and a fragile, burgeoning trust. Alistair met her eyes briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He was operating on instinct, far outside his comfort zone, the implications of his actions vast and unknown. Yet beneath the anxiety, a strange, unfamiliar sensation stirred, a sense of rightness, of profound, undeniable purpose. The Willow Creek townhouse, one of Alistair's lesser-used properties. was a quiet haven tucked away on a tree-lined street. It was fully furnished, impeccably maintained by a discreet service, and blessedly private. As Michael navigated into the heated garage, Alistair was already ending his call with Mrs. Davies, his longtime housekeeper, a woman whose calm competence and kind heart he implicitly trusted. Inside, the townhouse radiated a quiet warmth. Alistair led Sarah to a spacious sitting room, where a gas fireplace flickered to life with a touch of a button. The sudden transition from brutal cold to enveloping warmth seemed to make Sarah sway. She sank into a deep armchair, still cradling Lily, her body racked with tremors now that the adrenaline was fading. "Mrs. Davies will be here very soon with everything you and Lily need," Alistair explained, feeling an uncharacteristic awkwardness. "And Dr. Evans, a trusted physician, is on her way to check on you both." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes vast pools of exhaustion and confusion. "Why?" she whispered, the question hanging in the air. "Why are you doing all this?" Alistair paused, searching for an honest answer. He could have given her cash, directed her to a city shelter. This was involvement, deep involvement. "No one," he said, his voice softer than he intended, "should have to endure a night like this, especially not with child." The arrival of Mrs. Davies was a flurry of gentle efficiency. Her kind, matronly face registered Sarah and Lily's plight with instant compassion, not pity. Without fuss, she began to coax Lily from Sarah's arms, her experienced hands expertly assessing the baby, murmuring soft, soothing words. Sarah watched, her anxiety a palpable thing, yet she relinquished her hold. Soon, Lily was being gently cleaned, wrapped in a new plush blanket that Mrs. Davies had foresightly brought, and a bottle of warm formula was being prepared. Dr. Evans arrived, her calm professionalism a reassuring presence. She examined Lily first, her expression serious, but becoming more relaxed as she continued. Then she turned her attention to Sarah. Lily, she later reported Alistair, was significantly underweight and suffering from mild exposure, but her core temperature was stabilizing, and she was surprisingly resilient. Sarah was diagnosed with severe exhaustion, malnutrition, and the early stages of hypothermia, but nothing that dedicated rest, proper nutrition, and warmth couldn't remedy. While Mrs. Davies settled a now-sleeping Lily into a makeshift bassinet fashioned from a laundry basket lined with soft towels, and Dr. Evans administered to Sarah, Alistair found himself pacing the ornate library. He was a man accustomed to control, to solutions. This situation, however, required something more than directives. It needed patience, sustained care, human understanding. Later that evening, after Sarah had managed some warm broth and was resting in a comfortable guest bedroom, Lily sleeping soundly in a proper cot Mrs. Davies had procured, Alistair sat quietly in an armchair by the low fire. Sarah was awake, propped against pillows, watching him with an unreadable expression. "My name is Sarah," she offered, her voice barely above a whisper. "And my daughter, she's Lily." "Alistair," he replied simply. Slowly, haltingly at first, then with a quiet flow of words, Sarah began to share her story. She spoke of losing her waitress job when a small, family-owned diner closed without warning, of Lily's father, a charming but transient musician, who had promised her forever and then disappeared the moment she told him she was pregnant. She recounted the kindness of friends that eventually wore thin, the impersonal bureaucracy of shelters that were often full or felt unsafe for a new mother. It wasn't a tale of dramatic, self-inflicted failure, Alistair noted, but a heartbreaking chronicle of cascading misfortunes, of slipping through the social safety nets that were supposed to catch people like her. There was no self-pity in her voice, only a profound, bone-deep weariness and undercurrent of fierce, maternal love. Alistair listened, truly listened, in a way he hadn't listened to anyone outside his corporate sphere for years. He saw not an anonymous homeless woman, But Sarah, a young mother, pushed to the brink, yet possessing an incredible inner strength. He saw Lily, a tiny spark of life whose future had been so perilously uncertain just hours before. He made more calls. He arranged for a private nurse to stay for the next few days to monitor Sarah and Lily. He ordered a full stock of groceries, baby supplies, and comfortable clothing. He informed his astonished personal assistant that he would be working remotely from the Willow Creek address for the foreseeable future, a decision that sent quiet ripples of speculation through Finch Industries. A part of him, the CEO part, felt the pull of his demanding schedule, the familiar rhythm of his high-stakes world. But the image of Sarah's desperate, trusting face and the sound of Lily's soft breathing from the next room exerted a far more powerful magnetism. He found himself drawn to Lily's room, standing by her cot, watching her sleep. A strange, protective warmth spread through his chest, an emotion so unfamiliar it was almost startling. He had brief, quiet conversations with Sarah, learning about her quiet dignity, her intelligence, her resilience despite everything she'd endured. He was addressing their immediate, critical needs. But a larger, more complex question began to form. What happens next? This temporary sanctuary was not a permanent solution. His act of kindness was escalating, deepening his involvement, and the prospect, while undeniably daunting, also carried an unexpected sense of profound significance. He was feeling connected. He was feeling responsible, and the responsibility, surprisingly, felt less like a burden and more like an anchor in the often turbulent seas of his life. The days at Willow Creek stretched into a week, then two. Under the combined care of Mrs. Davies, the nurse, and the peaceful environment, Sarah began to regain her physical strength. The hunted look in her eyes slowly softened, replaced by a tentative glow of hope. Color returned to her cheeks. Lily, a remarkably content baby, started to fill out, her coos and gurgles echoing softly through the townhouse, sounds that Alistair found unexpectedly comforting. Mrs. Davies became a gentle, guiding presence, her practical wisdom a balm to Sarah, and in many ways to Alistair himself. He found himself lingering in the kitchen while Mrs. Davies prepared meals, engaging in quiet conversations that touched upon everyday things, a domesticity that was utterly foreign yet surprisingly pleasant. Alistair continued to manage his empire, albeit from the townhouse's well-appointed library. His video calls were just as sharp, his decisions as incisive, but his team noted a subtle shift, a new patience, a hint of something softer in his demeanor. He learned more about Sarah. She'd been a bright student, forced to abandon her studies due to family illness. She confessed a quiet passion for art and design, a dream she'd long since buried under the weight of survival. Sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, Alistair would see her sketching on a stray notepad. Intricate floral patterns, whimsical characters for Lily, surprisingly sophisticated logo ideas. Her talent was undeniable, raw but evident. One afternoon, as Sarah was recounting some of her frustrating attempts to find stable employment before Lily's birth, she mentioned a particular disappointment. "I was so close to getting a job at this wonderful little artisan bakery," she said, a wistful expression crossing her face. It was called Sweet Surrender Bakery, over on Elm Street. Their lemon tarts were famous. I actually had a final interview scheduled, but then they just closed. Overnight, I heard the owner had a sudden health crisis. Alistair felt a jolt, as if a forgotten door in his memory had been suddenly thrown open. "Sweet Surrender Bakery," he repeated, his voice carefully neutral, though his heart had begun to beat a little faster. Sarah nodded, oblivious to his internal reaction. Yes, it was such a charming place. Always smelled incredible. The kind of place that made you feel instantly happy. The name echoed in Alistair's mind, unleashing a cascade of poignant memories. His late wife, Eleanor. Sweet Surrender had been her absolute favorite. She'd often stop there after her volunteer work, bringing home a small box of their delicate pastries, her eyes dancing with a childlike delight. He remembered her deep sadness when it closed, her concern for the owners, her lament for the loss of such a beloved neighborhood institution. Eleanor, who had possessed such a generous spirit, such an innate empathy for those struggling on the margins. She had even established a small, private foundation, a passion project aimed at helping women entrepreneurs get their start, a project that had languished after her sudden passing. Alistair, lost in his grief and the all-consuming demands of his business, had ensured its continued funding as a dutiful tribute, but he hadn't engaged with its mission personally. It had become just another entry in his vast financial ledger. He looked at Sarah then, truly looked at her quiet intelligence, her artistic flair, her fierce maternal love. He saw in her the very kind of woman Eleanor would have championed, would have moved mountains to help. He thought of Eleanor's foundation, its mission statement clearly etched in his memory, empowering women one dream at a time. He had carried on her name, but had he truly carried on her spirit? The locket in his briefcase, his mother's locket, suddenly felt like a conduit to all the important women in his life, to the love and strength they represented. This was more than just an impulse to help. This was the sign, a convergence, a chance to honor Eleanor's legacy in a way that was tangible, meaningful, and deeply personal. A way, perhaps, to heal a part of himself he hadn't even realized was still so wounded. "Sarah," he said, his voice imbued with a newfound energy, a resonance that surprised even him. "You're mentioning sweet surrender. It struck a chord, a very significant one. I think I might have an idea that could help you, truly help you, build a future for yourself and Lily." This was no longer about simply providing temporary shelter and aid. This was about fostering a dream, rebuilding a life. And in doing so, Alistair sensed he might just be on the verge of rebuilding something vital within his own. The path forward was still crystallizing, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Alistair Finch felt a clear, unwavering sense of purpose that had nothing to do with profit margins or market share. It was a purpose rooted in connection, in compassion, in the quiet, powerful legacy of love. The following days saw Alistair Finch move with focused intensity his colleagues hadn't witnessed in years. But this energy was directed towards an entirely new venture. He delved into the dormant files of the Eleanor Finch Foundation for Women's Empowerment. Its mission, clearly articulated by Eleanor herself, resonated with him now as never before. He convened urgent meetings with his financial advisors, not to discuss corporate acquisitions, but to revitalize and significantly expand the Foundation's resources, to give it the teeth Eleanor had always envisioned. Then he sat down with Sarah, not in the formal library, but in the sun-drenched sitting room, where Lily was happily batting at a mobile hanging over her playmat. The atmosphere was relaxed, hopeful. "Sarah," he began, his tone earnest, "when you mentioned the Sweet Surrender Bakery, it was more than just a coincidence for me. My late wife, Eleanor, she adored that place. More than that, she had a profound passion for helping talented, determined women who simply needed an opportunity, a leg up." Sarah listened, her expression shifting from curiosity to wide-eyed astonishment as Alistair continued. "Eleanor established a small foundation," he explained, a gentle warmth in his voice as he spoke of his wife. "Its sole purpose was to provide seed funding, mentorship, and support for women looking to start their own businesses or to gain skills for a new career. After she passed away," he paused, a flicker of old sorrow momentarily shadowing his eyes before being replaced by a new resolve, "I ensured it remained funded, but I confess I didn't give it the personal attention it deserved. I want to rectify that. And, Sarah, I want to start with you." He then laid out his idea, carefully, thoughtfully. This wasn't about a handout, he emphasized, but an investment. He'd made inquiries. The old Sweet Surrender Bakery premises were still vacant. with the foundation's backing. Perhaps they could explore reviving it or creating something new, if baking was truly her passion. Or, he continued, noticing the way her eyes lit up whenever her sketches were mentioned, the foundation could fully support her in pursuing formal training in graphic design, helping her build a portfolio and launch a career. "I've seen your drawing, Sarah," he said, gesturing to a few delicate sketches of woodland creatures she'd done for Lily, now pinned to a corkboard. "You have a rare talent, an eye for beauty and detail." Eleanor would have recognized it instantly. Sarah stared at him, momentarily speechless. Tears welled, glistening in her eyes. Not the desolate tears of that first encounter, but tears of overwhelming, incredulous gratitude. You would actually do that?" she finally managed, her voice trembling with emotion. "For me? For Lily? After everything, after I came to you with nothing?" Eleanor would have insisted. Alistair said, a soft, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in what felt like ages. "And I wholeheartedly agree with her spirit. This isn't charity in the way most people think of it, Sarah. This is an investment in potential. Your potential. You are a strong, resourceful, and gifted woman. All you ever needed was for one door to finally open for you." Sarah slowly covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Alistair waited patiently, giving her the space for her emotions. When she looked up again, her face was transformed, luminous with a hope so radiant it seemed to fill the room. I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "No one has ever believed in me, in my abilities, like this. It's long past time someone did," Alistair said, his voice gentle but firm. He then did something that would have been unthinkable for the Alistair Finch of a few weeks prior. He reached out, not for a formal handshake, but in a simple gesture of human solidarity, and lightly placed his hand over hers where it rested on the arm of the chair. "We'll explore all the options. Together." Later that afternoon, Alistair found himself holding Lily while Sarah spoke with a foundation consultant he'd arranged. The baby girl, now chubby-cheeked and thriving, gazed up at him with wide, trusting blue eyes and then, with a gurgle of pure delight, offered him a dazzling, gummy smile. A profound, quiet joy settled over Alistair, a warmth that permeated the long empty chambers of his heart. It was a feeling more deeply satisfying than any successfully closed deal, more valuable than any surge in his company's stock. This connection, this quiet sense of belonging, this was real. He recalled Sarah's desperate plea on that frozen night. "Take my baby." He hadn't taken her in the way Sarah had originally meant, but in a far more profound sense he had. He had taken her and her mother into the sphere of his care, his concern, and in doing so had allowed them to enter his life, enriching it in ways he was only just beginning to understand. The opulent, sterile silence of his penthouse now seemed like a cage from a former life. Here, in this warm, light-filled room, with this resilient mother and her beautiful child, Alistair Finch felt, for the first time in decades, something akin to being truly home. The months that followed were a period of profound and joyful transformation for everyone. Sarah, after much soul-searching and with Alistair's unwavering encouragement, chose to pursue her passion for graphic design. The Eleanor Finch Foundation funded her enrollment in a prestigious online design program, and her innate talent, now nurtured by formal training, blossomed spectacularly. She moved into a modest but bright, cheerful apartment, its walls soon adorned with her artwork and Lily's gleeful scribbles. Alistair helped her secure freelance design projects through his network, allowing her to earn a good income while continuing her studies, always ensuring that Lily had the best possible childcare and every opportunity to thrive. Alistair himself was a changed man. The transformation was evident not in grand pronouncements, but in countless small ways. His voice during board meetings had a new note of warmth. He began actively listening to the personal concerns of his employees, fostering a more compassionate corporate culture. He started leaving the office at a reasonable hour, a development that initially stunned his staff. He became a regular visitor at Sarah and Lily's apartment, no longer a distant benefactor, but cherished friend, a mentor to Sarah, and a beloved honorary uncle to Lily. He discovered a surprising aptitude for reading bedtime stories, his deep baritone surprisingly soothing, and Lily would often reach out to pat his cheek with her small, sticky hand, her innocent affection a constant source of quiet joy for him. The Eleanor Finch Foundation for Women's Empowerment flourished under Alastair's personal guidance. Inspired by Sarah's journey, he poured not just his wealth, but his considerable business acumen and his newfound passion into its mission. It expanded its reach, helping dozens and hundreds of women across the city, single mothers, aspiring entrepreneurs, women seeking to escape cycles of poverty, to find their footing, to acquire new skills, to chase long-deferred dreams, and to build secure, hopeful futures for themselves and their families. Finch Industries even launched a pioneering corporate social responsibility initiative, partnering with local shelters and community organizations to provide job training, childcare support, and pathways to stable employment for parents facing homelessness. The icy, wind-swept street corner where Alastair had first encountered Sarah felt like a scene from another lifetime, yet remained a pivotal moment, the crucible in which his old life had been smelted down and reformed. That single, desperate plea from a mother at her wit's end had unknowingly triggered a cascade of kindness, connection, and unforeseen happiness. Alastair often reflected on that night. The swirling snow, the palpable fear in Sarah's eyes, the terrifying weight of the choice he'd faced. He now understood that true wealth wasn't measured in stock portfolios or the height of skyscrapers, but in the depth of human connection, in the profound satisfaction of making a tangible, positive difference in another person's life. One sun-drenched Saturday afternoon, Alastair sat on the floor of Sarah's cozy living room. Lily, now a confident toddler, took a series of wobbly but determined steps toward him, her face alight with triumphant glee as she collapsed into his outstretched arms amidst peals of laughter. Sarah watched him from her armchair, a soft, contented smile on her face, her eyes shining with a happiness that filled the small apartment with an almost tangible warmth. "Thank you, Alastair," she said quietly, her voice rich with emotion, "for seeing me, for believing in me. You didn't just change our lives. You gave us a life we could never have imagined." Alastair looked up, his own eyes reflecting the warmth of the room, his smile genuine and heartfelt. "You and Lily gave me something far more valuable in return, Sarah," he replied, his voice sincere. "You reminded me what it truly means to be alive, what truly matters." He knew, with a quiet, unshakable certainty, that this was not an ending, but a beautiful new beginning. The kindness set in motion on that desperate, frozen night had not only transformed his life and Sarah's, but it also ignited a beacon of hope, a ripple effect of compassion that would continue to spread, warming a world that so often felt too cold. And in that shared warmth, Alastair Finch had found not just a renewed sense of purpose, but a deep, abiding peace. The old silver locket, his mother's gift, now lay open on his dresser. Next to the faded photograph of his mother, there was now a tiny, bright image of a smiling mother and her laughing little girl, a daily reminder of the unexpected joy that can blossom from a single act of human kindness.